Well, the thing we feared, Kaleb McGary missing significant time, is happening. We'll break it all down, as well as the Falcons' preseason loss to the Dallas Cowboys.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a., and I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for almost 2 decades, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP, still going strong as the humble host of this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that goes strong with me. We are coming up on 9 years this November around Thanksgiving. And I appreciate all of you that go strong with me as everydayers. That means you make this podcast your first listen each and every day. All you got to do to become an everydayer, subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So we will be getting into sort of who made their final bid for roster spots for all you sickos that sat here and watched all 4 quarters of this Dallas Cowboys preseason finale. And for those of you that did not watch all 4 quarters, we'll be breaking it all down for you. The highs, all 2 of them, and the lows, all 15 of them in this 31-13 loss to the Dallas Cowboys in the preseason finale. It could have been a lot worse. We've seen worse from the Falcons in these types of games, but obviously, the debacle of that game is only going to be overshadowed by the news that we did not want to hear, but we figured Raheem Morris would give us an update. And again, it wasn't a specific update, but Raheem Morris post-game was asked about Kaleb McGary's status, and he said he would miss significant time and mentioned an injured reserve designation could be a possibility. And of course, Raheem giving vague sentiments when it comes to injuries as usual. And so what does that mean, right? Basically, it's the same thing that he said about DeMarco Hellams last year, that he was going to miss significant time. And DeMarco Hellams was a player that at some point in the season, Raheem talked about possibly coming back, but never did. He missed the entire season. And I apologize for the pessimism, guys, but until told otherwise, I would just assume at this point that Kaleb McGary is going to miss the entire year. Hopefully at some point we'll get some good news, but the way that Raheem talks about these things, he's not going to be very forthcoming with specifics. So he's going to say he's going to miss significant time. And so I'm just going to assume he's going to miss the season. Now, again, hopefully we get some good news at some point later in the season and we can come back on and be like, hey guys, Kaleb McGary's coming back and it's going to, do all the things that we want it to do. But I would just say, for the sake of time being, just assume he's not going to play this year. So it means, that was the big question we had. If how much time would Kaleb McGary miss, right? Sometime. What is sometime? Is that 2 weeks, 2 months, or longer? Given this, I would assume we're going to miss the entire season, and it means that the Falcons should bring in some help, because I don't think the next man up, based off of what we've been talking about all preseason long, and you continue to see it on display in this Cowboys game, the second string offensive line is not ready. And we didn't see Elijah Wilkinson tonight. Raheem mentioned out of abundance of caution that they didn't want to play him. He is the next man up to fill Kaleb McGary's shoes immediately at that right tackle position. I went back on Friday afternoon and rewatched all his pass rushing reps, or pass protection reps, against the Titans last week. I thought he was okay. Again, not going to sit here and tell you, oh, he was great, but I think he showed enough in terms of his technique and athleticism that he could be serviceable for a extended period of time, which right now I'm thinking is like 4 to 6 weeks, but we'll see how that goes. And so I think you can tread water with Elijah Wilkinson at right tackle in theory. We'll see if the reality matches the theory. But I think you got to bring in more help, with the season being 2 weeks away. I don't know if that's enough time that help is going to be able to come in and start week 1. So I think the goal is that, you plan on Elijah Wilkinson starting week 1. You start getting him those reps with Chris Lindstrom over the next 2 weeks. And hopefully you can build as much continuity and rapport that you can in these next 2 weeks with him in the building. You bring in additional help. You essentially plan to go into the season with, okay, Elijah, you're going to have a 2-week audition, right? That assuming that you're not an absolute disaster in that season opener against Tampa Bay against Hassan Reddick, hopefully. But we're gonna give you a 2-week audition against the Bucs and the Vikings to start the season, and that will give whoever we bring in, this upcoming week or these upcoming days, whether that's via trade, whether that's via waiver wire, whether it's a free agent, that will give that guy a month to get up to speed, and he should be up to speed at that point. And so if Wilkinson struggles and we need to pivot, that guy will now be ready to pivot around week 3 against the Panthers. And if Wilkinson is fine, then we can just keep it moving and have that guy on the back burner. And then potentially that guy would have a 2-week audition or more. And hopefully Storm Norton is back in week 5. We had to report earlier this week that he had the ankle surgery and is going to miss 6 to 8 weeks, which with the season being 2 weeks away, that means he's going to miss 4 to 6 games. Now, that's not a definite. These injuries linger. There may be a ramp up period given that Storm Norton's missed a large chunk of the summer dealing with this ankle injury. So there's no guarantee that he's going to be back week 5. But you figure out Wilkinson and new guy, you can make it work with those 2 guys for 4 to 6 games if need be. And then hopefully Storm comes back and you're good to go for the rest of the season. And, you just basically, you got 3 options: Elijah Wilkinson, Storm Norton, and whoever you bring in. And at least one of these options will stick. You throw them all at the wall and one of them will stick. You don't necessarily want a revolving door at this right tackle position because you want to build continuity with Chris Lindstrom in the time that Kaleb McGary is absent. But at this point, you just kind of, beggars cannot be choosers, and you got to do whatever you take. So this is going to continue to be an ongoing conversation for the next 2 weeks. This is probably going to be, hopefully this is the biggest story for the Falcons over the next 2 weeks as we get geared up for week 1. Hopefully there isn't a bigger story, because that usually is a bad sign, right? That's bad news. Maybe there's a better positive story, hey, Michael Parsons, come distract us. We can hope, guys. It ain't happening, but hey, we'll take what we can get at this point. So, this will be an ongoing conversation, but essentially this is a huge blow to the run game. So, I say that it's going to be ongoing because we're not going to unpack it all on today's episode. That we'll continue to unpack this over the next 2 weeks. But this is potentially a huge blow to the run game. I don't think it's going to be as disastrous in pass protection as some people are saying. I know everybody's worried about the blind side and protecting Michael Penix, but I feel like the blind side stuff has been overblown because it's not 1982 anymore, and that stuff doesn't really matter anymore. It really only matters like if you're going to be a straight drop back passing attack, meaning that you're going to operate from under center and your quarterback's going to turn his back to one side and a straight drop back passing attack. And the Falcons only drop back from under center 8% of the time in Michael Penix's 3 starts. Now that number may change this upcoming season. That number may increase. It was only 20% for Kirk Cousins. But when you're operating a pistol in the shotgun, you can see whoever's lined up, to your right on your blind side if you're Michael Penix, or to your left if that's your blind side if you're Kirk Cousins, operating from shotgun or pistol, which the Falcons seemingly operated 80+% of the time last year. And again, that number may change, but if it does change, it's going to be primarily because you're doing a lot of play action, which at that point, you're not really worried about the blind side because of the play action. So I feel like the whole pass protection, Michael Penix is going to die again. Like, I'm not sitting here trying to tell you like it's a non-issue. It's certainly an issue, but I don't think it's nearly as dire a situation as people make it out to be. Like, Kaleb McGary was like a 5 out of 10 pass protector anyway, and so if you can get someone that can come in as a replacement level player, be like a 4 out of 10, like that's not a huge drop off. Again, it's a drop off. It's still not optimal, but it's not as if like, suddenly your entire pass protection is going to break. So I feel like it's the run game that really matters, because Kaleb McGary was like an 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 run blocker. And, based off what we've seen so far from Elijah Wilkinson, that's a 5 out of 10. Based off what we've seen from Storm Norton, that's kind of a 5 out of 10 type of run blocker. And that's going to have a huge, devastating blow potentially to your run game this year. And, it's pretty much killing the Bijan Robinson RB1 hype that we've been pushing for most of the summer of like, this guy's going to lead the NFL in rushing this year. He's your best bet. So if you haven't had your fantasy draft, I would hold off on potentially taking Bijan number 1 overall, right? If you're on the fence about taking Bijan number 1 overall, I get off the fence. I wouldn't necessarily go all in on Bijan number 1 overall, or Bijan, I'm sorry, number 1 overall at this stage. Still probably take him in the top 3 or 5. Don't get me wrong, But because of all these questions with the run game, like I don't know if that's as smart a bet as it appeared to be, a week or two ago. So there's still a lot more to unpack. We'll see how it all plays out. We'll continue having this conversation over the next 2 weeks as we get geared up for that week 1 action. But let's, finish today's episode talking about this incredible football game between the Atlanta Falcons and Dallas Cowboys. And we'll talk about why do these preseason finales always seem so ugly as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So this episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. With the NFL kickoff almost here, it means the fantasy football season is back in full swing, and Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, I'm playing in Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've in one league, a keeper league in Yahoo Fantasy for 20 years. I'm starting another league this year, and the updates that they're rolling out this month are, pun intended, fantastic. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it all off, they just dropped their Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your team together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, though, you can still play the head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. So stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. So we got another ugly preseason finale. It wasn't as ugly as last year's, right? With the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they beat us 31-0. And that was just a joke of a game. This one started out like it was going to be a joke of a game because Dallas marched right down the field on the opening 2 drives, got up to like a 14-0 lead, and it was tough. It was tough. But the Falcons kind of marched back in the second quarter. Played better, made it interesting, and sort of cut their lead at halftime. I think what was the score at halftime? It was 17-10. And then Dallas scored it in the third quarter, and then fourth quarter happened, and the Falcons just were like, okay, let's pack it up, and so it's always funny to me every offseason, like everybody gets so hyped up, me, Mr. Drew, that negative Nancy, right? And I'm always like, do y'all forget how this goes? And again, like I understand being hyped for the season. I don't understand why people get hyped for the preseason, because the Falcons are always terrible in the preseason, and we always get 12 quarters of bad football, right? Like the fact that we got like something against who did we play the first game? The Lions, and it was like, oh my God, this is new. I've never seen this before. And then everything fell back down to earth against the Titans. And it always culminates in this, at least certainly under Raheem, these third quarter disastrous performance. At least in past regimes, like sometimes the Falcons would pull it together in that third preseason game and avoid, or that final preseason game back when it was 4 games and whatnot, and be like, okay, like it's not a complete disaster. But with Raheem, because of how Raheem treats preseason as just going through the motions, right? It was so clear, just going through the motion. You just get these letdown performances every single time in these third preseason games with Raheem, and it's just like, man, do we have to do it again? I'm contractually obligated to have to watch these games. You're not. So I hope most of you guys got a chance to do something more constructive, more positive in your life than having to witness this game. 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter, one by Easton Stick with about 11 minutes to go, where he just was like, linebackers dropping into coverage. I'm not going to read the defense. I'm just going to throw the football to Quincy Skinner and hope that the linebacker is just going to teleport away from the football. And the linebacker did not teleport away from the football. He just threw it right to him. And it's just, another classic preseason performance from Easton Stick, right? It was so good in the Lions game. That was part of it, where it's like, oh, we actually got really good quarterback play from Easton Stick in that Lions game. And then the last 2 weeks, it hasn't been pretty. I don't think it's been as bad as probably it looks at face value, but like each of the last 3 games, we get like 3 really bad brain farts from Easton Stick, where like he's just, but like, what are you doing, my guy? Like you're doing too much. Like, don't do that. Like, why are you doing that? You don't have to go out there and win the job. You have the job. You will be the third quarterback on this team. It's just a question of whether or not you're going to be on the roster of the practice squad. Like, I promise you, no one's coming for you, Easton. Just check the ball down. Let's go. You know? Like, there's a reason why you were the last man standing at the dance this offseason in terms of veteran quarterbacks, where the Falcons were like, oh, I guess at some point, if we do trade Kirk, we do have to bring in another veteran. So who's available? Oh, Easton Stick? Okay, yeah, we'll take him. Sure. So, then we got Ben DiNucci, Pitt legend. It came in and just DiNucci'd it up. The Nucci is loose, baby. First snap, fourth quarter. He comes in midway through the fourth quarter, and he's like, "I'm throwing it deep to Nick Nash, right? I'm unleashing this dragon." And it's like, man, this is Rex. Like, do y'all remember Rex Grossman? That one summer we had Rex Grossman back. What was that? 2015, I think it was. It was an incredible summer because it was just like I'm unleashing the dragon, and it got picked off. And after that point, it was like, just run the ball, man. Just run the ball. Let's get out of here, man. So that was the highlight of the game. And then after that point, the running game actually kind of clicked, right? Like you had some Elijah Dotson. It's like, oh, Elijah Dotson, I forgot you were on this team. Like, he had a couple of nice runs. Ja'Shawn Corbin had a couple of nice runs throughout the game, right? It was a quiet game for Nathan Carter after his big debut, or his breakout, I guess you could say, last week against the Titans. If I was guessing, there was one of the questions I had going in this game, who's going to be the RB3. If I was guessing, I would think it would be Ja'Shawn Corbin. But it's kind of a toss-up, and I feel like, we're going to spend so much time talking about, who's going to be the new tackle that we're going to bring in this weekend, that, it wouldn't shock me at all if the Falcons bring in a running back too, because, like, as I said, like, you need to have the thing with the running back, you need to have a guy that you trust in pass protection. That's what you need in that third running back. And ideally a guy that you can trust in pass protection and also play some special teams maybe. And so I don't know if, like, Corbin's the guy that seemingly is getting the bulk of the snaps on special teams and has seemingly got most of the snaps in pass protection. That's why I tend to lean towards him. And I feel like this was probably his best rushing game of the preseason. But that's not saying much because, once again, the second string offensive line wasn't getting. Shout out to my boys, Jovan Gwynn and Brandon Parker. Y'all are out here doing work. Like, Kyle Hinton is no longer the target of my fury anymore, guys. It's just like Jovan Gwynn and Brandon Parker. Y'all been in this system, Gwynn for 3 years, Parker for 2, and it looks like we just got you off the street. Right. And I don't mean like, oh, a street free agent. I'm talking about like you are homeless on the street. You are unhoused on the street. And we decided, hey, you know what? You're a big guy. Go play some football. So, shout out to you, Dwayne Ledford. Just Dwayne Ledford. If you can, there's got to be some Ponzi scheme that you're running with this offensive line room. If you can convince this regime to keep these guys on the roster. Shout out to you, my guy. Like, you got these guys in the multi-level marketing scheme. You got them, selling whatever they're selling. Okay, I want an investigation. Okay, what's going on in that O-line room? Because they ain't here to play football. I tell you that much. They're not here to play football. So that was fun to watch in this game. But wide receivers look solid. Nick Nash, Chris Blair really look solid. Blair had that drop, man. We almost had the hat trick, the Easton Stick, the Chris Blair touchdown that we see in each of the first two preseason games. He had a walk-in touchdown on a slant, and he just dropped the ball. The moment got too big for him. But other than that one play, I thought Blair and Nash really looked good. They were kind of the standouts on the offense. And defensively, we'll get into sort of who stood out, who didn't on defense. But one of the things when we talk about, to wrap up today's episode, like, get into some of these roster battles, right? We already talked about the running back position. We'll talk a little bit more about, did Blair and Nash do enough to make the roster at the wide receiver position? But I really want to focus in on the cornerback position because, the question is going to be, did anybody win a roster spot tonight? If there's one guy that I can say won a job, it might be the cornerback, CJ Henderson. And we'll get into why as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. These days, you get a lot of advice, online and on social media, and, it might work for some people, but what exactly is going to work for you? It can be overwhelming, and, to help you figure it out, why not talk to a licensed therapist with BetterHelp? And that can make all the difference where you're going to get real personalized guidance instead of just guessing based off of what, you saw on your social media feed. And I personally have benefited from therapy. It's not just about navigating the challenges and trauma in life. It's also about building positive coping skills, right? It's why I'm so chill watching this disaster of a Falcons preseason game. I use these coping skills. You don't control what you can control, and I cannot control whether or not the Falcons play well in the preseason. And BetterHelp has taught me that. And with over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, serving over 5 million people. It's easy to fit in your schedule. Just click to connect, and you can even switch therapists at any time if you need to. So talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So one of the things that we go into this third preseason game, we keep an eye on the depth chart, right? To sort of see how this game's, and again, obviously we'll go back, review the film and maybe miss some things live in the moment. But it was notable to me, going back to the wide receiver conversation, we didn't get to see David Sills in this game, right? Casey Washington sat last week. We said, okay, he's locked in wide receiver 6. And the question is, with Darnell Mooney being down, been a couple weeks away for 4 weeks, will they keep 7 wide receivers? And it feels like with David Sills, again, maybe he played in this game, but I didn't see him. It looked like he was inactive to me. And so that kind of tells you that I think it's Sills for wide receiver 7 if they're going to keep 7. And then Blair and Nash are really prime practice squad guys. And based off how they played this summer, I wouldn't be shocked that they did not clear waivers. In addition to Elijah Wilkinson not being out there, I didn't see Tegan Quatoriano. Feels like that tight end 3 spot is locked in. No Arnold McGarry, no James Pierce, no Jalen Walker, no Jordan Fuller, Xavier Watts. Didn't see Billy Bowman, didn't see Brandon Dorlus. Again, none of these guys were on the roster bubble, but at least worth noting that, they were not out there. While we did see Zach Harrison, we did see Ruka Rora, we did see Morgan Fox, LaCale London, and Kentavious Street. So we got to see a lot of the D tackles that we expect the Falcons keep and very few of the edge rushers. We did see D'Angelo Malone in this game and Braylon Trice, just because they didn't have enough bodies there. Got to see a lot of, Ronnie Perkins as well. I thought he had an impressive debut, but unfortunately that room is a little too loaded. Khalid Kareem looked a little sluggish coming off his injury that caused him to miss last week. So, they needed bodies out there. So that explains why some guys that were sitting here going like, oh, that guy's a roster lock. And why was he playing tonight? Based off of hearing, this is a practice squad game. Like, you shouldn't be playing. Well, part of the problem, with a 90-man roster, you got to get down to 53. That means you got 37 guys that you're going to cut. But it's hard to get through an NFL game just playing 37 guys, right? In a normal NFL game, you're going to play 48 guys. So, essentially there's going to be around a dozen guys, at least a dozen guys that are going to play in preseason games like this that are not in danger of being cut, but, you need them to play just to get through the game. And that's where the Zach Harrisons and the Ruka Roros and whatnot. But it was notable to me that Morgan Fox and LaCale London were kind of the final 2 D tackles out there. And, we've talked before about, is Morgan Fox as solidified? And going into the summer, we're like, oh, of course, Morgan Fox is going to be solidified. He's the veteran guy. But the way that the Falcons have treated him as a sort of a back-end depth guy, yeah, he probably on the roster bubble. No, again, the question we had, last week was how many D linemen are the Falcons going to keep? We feel confident about 10 of these guys. But, Morgan Fox is not one of the 10 that we feel confident about, or at least I don't feel confident about. Rook and Harrison are, Trice is in that group. D'Angelo Malone, I'm counting as a linebacker. So, it'll be interesting to see, if they keep 10, or they keep 11, they keep 12. I've seen consistent projections over at AtlantaFalcons.com. I have 13, as I explained on an earlier pod this week. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me to keep that many guys, because it's just like, okay, I don't know, but we'll see. Again, the Falcons do weird stuff all the time. So we'll see. I told the Locked On Falcons insiders before the game started that there were about 45 guys going into this game that I felt were pretty secure. And I did include Morgan Fox in that 45. just because I was like, yeah, I think they'll probably wind up keeping him. And so now I'm not so sure. So it should be 44. And so that basically meant there were like 9 jobs up for grabs tonight. And I don't know if Morgan Fox is going to be one of them, but 2 of those jobs I thought, or at least one of those jobs I thought was going to be at the quarterback position, right? Where I felt like there were 4 cornerbacks in that 44 player locks. That's AJ Terrell, Mike Hughes, Billy Bowman, and Natron Brooks. I'm pretty confident they'll keep at least 5 corners, possibly 6. Again, I feel like it might be, keeping a 12th D lineman instead of a 6th corner. It might come down to that or something like that. But, it was interesting to see the rotation at quarterback. You saw some Lamar Jackson at safety due to an injury, I think, to Josh Thompson that limited him in this game. He did come back in the injury. Jake Hansen went down late in the game, and Jovan Gwynn had to go step in for him. So you do worry about that injury moving forward. But for the most part, I think it was injury-free night for the Falcons, as I recall. But I thought C.J. Henderson kind of had the best game of any of these cornerbacks. And we talked before about having that sort of quote unquote Clark Phillips role of the guy that's just an outside depth corner that doesn't play special teams. And I feel like CJ Henderson's come in and taking that job from Clark Phillips. At this point, I suspect Clark Phillips will probably be another potential IR candidate until he can come back from that rib injury, in a month or so. D. Alford had a rough night. Mike Ford stinks, he's always stunk. If you guys may recall, I complained about the Falcons signing him back in March, and I'm just like, yes, the chickens have come home to roost. Kobe Bryant had an up and down, or a down night. I don't know what ups Kobe Bryant had, right? He gave up a touchdown. Now, he was in pretty good position on that touchdown. It was a great throw and a great catch. But, it would have been fine if that was all he did, and we'd be like, okay, well, it wasn't bad coverage, so we can forgive that. And then he had 2 bad penalties, I think in the fourth quarter, where he had a DPI and then he had an illegal contact. And, this was the book on Kobe Bryant. He was very physical, and you get away with that in college because the rules are different in terms of how you can treat wide receivers. And it was, again, I know I've become the resident Kobe Bryant hater to a lot of folks just because, I'm a normal person, and I saw him as a sort of more of a back-end roster practice squad guy, while a lot of other people saw him as this guy's going to be the future of the Falcons cornerback room, which to me was always kind of ridiculous. But I think you saw that tonight. He's a practice squad guy. He hasn't done anything that's roster worthy other than just having hype and having compelling Instagram stories or whatever. Nothing he's done on the football field has earned a roster spot. So I don't get that, but Alford struggled. I was starting to come back around on D. Alford, maybe D. Alford might make the team after, spending the whole offseason to me he ain't making the team. And it's like, we're back. He ain't making the team. So we will see. If it was me, I would be like, there's 4 corners: Terrell, Hughes, Bowman, Brooks. The 5th guy is CJ Henderson. And for me, I'm just I'll just cut the rest of these guys and whatever, that's me. But I'm a hater, so we'll stash a couple guys in the practice squad. We'll put Clark on the IR or whatever. Mike Ford, hey, you can hang out in the practice squad, Mike Ford. We'll find out how much juice Marquise Williams has if he can convince Raheem Morris to keep Mike Ford, because that is purely a Marquise Williams roster move, because my man, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, this man is the worst cornerback in the NFL. He has been the worst cornerback in the NFL for 5 years. And the fact that he continues to get employed for being a middling special teams player is incredible to me. But, I don't get it. If I'm being too negative, guys, it's just hey, I had to watch this game, guys. I have to sit here and I'm contractually obligated to watch the Falcons stink it up in the preseason. I don't. It doesn't bother me that they lose. It's just just stop sucking. That's all I ask. And just don't suck. Give me something. They gave me a little something. Again, I've seen a 31-0 debacle in these games, but we'll see. So, we'll review the film. Unfortunately. We'll review the film. We'll see what takes change. I'll probably do a quote unquote final 53-man roster projection. We'll have some guests on to talk about any roster moves the Falcons make, how they fill the Kaleb McGary shoes as the week unfolds, what's the biggest storylines for the team heading into the season, all that stuff and more. And then, of course, the following week, we will get you guys geared up for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So continue to tune in. Right. Again, if this is your first Locked On Falcons, we are not this down on the team on a daily basis. I know some people are like, yes, you are, Aaron. Like, I promise you, we are not this down on the team. All right. We're going to sit here and we're going to be positive and optimistic about Elijah Wilkinson for the next 2 weeks. At least I am. I can't speak for my guests. But did you watch this game? Like, of course I'm down. Of course I'm going to be negative. Did you watch the game? Oh, man. But tune in to Locked On Falcons. And check us out on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Football. If you know how does the Kaleb McGary injury impact your ADPs of Bijan Robinson and all that stuff? Go check it out on Locked On Fantasy Football. It is all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.